Women voters in Rochester. I would like to welcome all of you here tonight, the candidates, the audience at home, and the audience that's viewing at a later date. I'd like to welcome you to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners in tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Public Library, for their help. Due to the current pandemic, we're limiting attendees to the candidates and necessary volunteers. Guidelines for social distancing and wearing of masks are also being followed. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we never endorse or support a political candidate or parties. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester, or any partner or sponsor of this forum. And the sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of a candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from League of Women Voters Rochester and the Post-Bulletin, as well as members of the public who have sent their questions in prior to the event. If you would like to submit questions of your own for a future forum, visit our Facebook page for information. Our Facebook page is titled League of Women Voters Rochester MN. They must be submitted at least 48 hours in advance. As there is never enough time to cover the issues in a limited time and setting such as this, please feel free to contact candidates' campaign headquarters directly if your questions are not addressed tonight. We'd like to thank all candidates for running for office, for offering to serve your community, and for the enormous time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and the political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features candidates for the Rochester City Council President. Candidates for this seat are Brooke Carlson, Vanjie Castro, and Kathleen Harrington. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statement. The candidates will then respond to questions submitted by the League of Women Voters Rochester, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, and the public who have submitted their questions in advance. Candidates will have 1 minute each to answer each question. The candidates will then have 2 minutes to make closing statements. I would like to suggest to candidates that you make your answer as succinct as possible. It isn't necessary to use the entire minute for your answer, but please finish your sentence if your time is up. We would like to cover as many questions as possible. The timekeeper tonight is League of Women Voter member Dee Voldal. Questions from the public were checked to ensure that they follow the League of Women Voter Rochester members, Maggie Brimajon, Jane Callahan, and Kathy Swessel. Asking questions will be Enid Weichselbaum from the League, and Randy Peterson from the Rochester Post-Bulletin. We're going to begin tonight with opening statements. Again, the candidates each have 2 minutes, and we are going to begin with candidate Castro.
Philippines, and I was raised in the California Bay Area, where I earned an associate's degree in liberal arts at the local community college, and then a bachelor's in political science at California State University, East Bay. I've lived in Rochester for 10 years and consider Rochester my home. I worked at a coffee shop my first year here, and then started working at the Diversity Council, collaborating with the school district and other organizations to deliver anti-bias workshops to help fight systemic and institutional racism. I've also worked for Planned Parenthood as the Education and Outreach Manager, and in 2019 was a community organizer with Fair Vote Minnesota working on advancing ranked choice voting in Greater Minnesota. I've dedicated my life working for the people in nonprofits, on boards, task force, and several different committees. I am passionate about public service and give back to my community as often as I can. We need to change the face of Rochester leadership, and we need someone who will be a leader for the people. Demographics are changing and the future looks like us. However, our leadership does not reflect that. We need to heal the city as we continue to live through a global pandemic, both COVID-19 and racism. It's time to lead with love for people and make our community a place where all Rochester residents feel included in the growth and vitality of the city we live and work in. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, moderator. Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Carlson. I grew up in Rochester, and I'm a proud JM Rocket. I moved my family back here because I wanted to raise my children here. I wanted to be close to my parents and have my children be close to my parents. But most of all, I wanted to focus my work in a community that I'm deeply passionate about. These are really difficult times and will require very tough decisions to move us forward. As a small business owner, a leader in the nonprofit community, a public health professional, a volunteer hockey coach, and a mom of 2 young sons, I share the worries and heartache felt by so many. And I know my experience uniquely positions me to help the city face the challenges ahead. I've committed my career to leading partnerships that address the underlying causes of inequity and improve communities. I rely on my expertise in urban planning, geography, and public health to build inclusive, strong communities where people can thrive. At the Minnesota Department of Health, I was part of a team that led the passage of state health legislation to improve health outcomes and reduce healthcare costs statewide. I convened bipartisan representatives to guide the development of a $47 million program that worked in 86 counties and 9 tribal governments in Minnesota. More recently, I convened 10 counties, multiple health systems and health plans, and community-based organizations to build the governance structure for our Southeast Minnesota Regional Mental Health Crisis Center. Right now, through my role leading the nonprofit consortium, I direct our cross-sector community response to COVID to ensure we're using our collective resources most efficiently to meet the needs of those in crisis. I'm a trusted community leader, an effective person who is committed to both protecting our people and our economy. In this time of uncertainty, it is my sincere commitment to bring our many voices together to create a more just community.
Thank you, Candidate Carlson and Candidate Harrington.
Thank you very much to the League and to the Post Bulletin for tonight. My name is Kathleen Harrington, and I am a candidate for president of the Rochester City Council. I came to Rochester about a decade ago, like many of you, for a job, but I decided to stay and make this my permanent home. I think Rochester's a great community, but the events of the past months have shown us a surprising fragility in our economy, and also serious and significant gaps in our community, gaps in opportunity, equity, and quality of life. So I'm running for change. I am running to change these circumstances, to change some of the decisions that have been made and that will be made in the future. Change is what I am running because I think we need to change in how we view and treat each other, change in what we should expect from city government, and change in how the city council functions. I especially want to see change in how the city promotes equity, opportunity, and equity. In the spirit of public service, I want to help lead our city through these extraordinary times, through the unprecedented recession and understanding of the impact of systemic racism in our community. I'm running on my record of proven leadership and service. I'm offering the learnings of a lifetime. I've worked in every level of government. I've built strong partnerships, created new programs, strengthened organizations, and developed strong collaborative teams. My platform's straightforward, 3 things. 1, promote a strong economic recovery for all, ensure Rochester is the most inclusive city we can be, and 3, aggressively advance a strong, sustainable quality of life for all. That is why I'm running. I ask for your support and vote on August 11th. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Harrington. Well, that leads us to our questions for the candidates. The first question is going to come from the League of Women Voters, Rochester. Candidate Harrington will go first, followed by Candidate Castro, and Candidate Carlson will be third. The question from the League, if Kathleen Harrington wants to, Candidate Harrington, if you want to make your way to the podium. Can we hear the questions first? Yeah. Candidate, how do you plan to address budget shortfalls due to COVID-19 challenges, and what are your priorities?
Thank you for that important question, and it is one that deals with the budget. And as I've looked at the budget proposal for 2021, I have real concerns. I have real concerns about the assumptions and real concerns about the increased spending. Among the assumptions that I'm concerned about are the projections for tax deferrals. I think it is short-sighted. I think we're going to face a much more serious situation. I'm also concerned that one of the assumptions is no additional federal or state assistance. I think that is an assumption that we have to change. I'm running because I know how to advocate. I know how to advocate at the federal level and the state level, and I want to bring the voice of Rochester to both those to make sure that we are able to get additional funds to support the recovery of the city. Thank you.
And Candidate Castro. Again, the question was addressing budget shortfalls due to COVID-19 and your
At 2020, 21, 2020, or 2021? Or just currently? All right, so my priorities are going to be about how the city is going to help working families as we move into the fall. How are we preparing, how the school district, what decision they're going to make about learning, and the supports that the city can provide for the families who need daycare. If unemployment rate is very high, we're at 9% here in Rochester, so how are we going to support folks who are struggling and looking for work? So that's where my focus would be, to make sure that we try to adjust the budget to address some of the struggling families that are going to be hurting as we move into the fall. Thank you.
Rochester is a great place to live, and we need a budget that both improves and maintains our city. The key budget priorities are infrastructure, public safety, and quality of life, the kind strengthened by resources like our award-winning library and our parks and recreation. But infrastructure means sewers. It also means people. So issues supporting people like childcare and job opportunities are critically important as well. In order to reimagine Rochester, this means that we as City Council need to be good stewards of our tax dollars and listen to citizen input on costly but important issues related to city budgeting. Rising tax burdens are frequently outside the city's control, but nonetheless, we must recognize the impact of rising taxes on this great city of Rochester. This is especially true as we lead our city towards a new, stronger reality. As we face a significant budget shortfall, we must maintain our notable 50-year AAA rating as well. And anything we do now.
Thank you. Our next question is going to be asked from the Post Bulletin, and the order of answers will be candidate Castro, Carlson, and Harrington.
The mayor and Rochester City Council recently discussed community recommendations for changes to local policing. What changes would you recommend regarding the local police operations?
My recommendations would be to divest and reinvest monies into programs that work to address lowering crime and criminality. Currently, one of the recommendations was that from the community they wanted a dashboard to see the data about excessive force use for RPD, and I thought that was a really great response that RPD provided. Also, they have added on 3 new social workers to the force, which I think they should continue doing that. But we need to change the culture of RPD. And we've done a lot of training, but I think we can do more. And so we need to invest some money into doing that. Thank you.
We're fortunate to have a strong police department to build on here. I had a conversation yesterday with Chief Franklin, and I feel hopeful that he shares my commitment to looking closely at our systems in order to support changes that have been identified by the Police Oversight Commission and others that have been brought to our community's attention. I think it's critically important we look at opportunities to reform our police department. I think it's also critically important we think as a system in this community. So any changes that the police department were to make need to be reinforced by investing in upstream issues like workforce, like education, like housing, because if we want to be successful in moving the needle on crime, we need to be successful in supporting people in their ability to thrive. Thank you.
This is a really important question for our community. It's unlike one that really should involve all of us. The events of the past few months, the murder of George Floyd, really requires all of us to look inside. Not just at the police department, but inside our own hearts. But I do think in terms of police reforms, we should continue to see the focus on the 21st century policing leadership. We should continue to see the focus on relational policing, and continue to see the excellent record that Chief Franklin has developed in terms of diversity hiring. We also need to monitor closely that dashboard that was developed in less than a month's time, showing us use of force and why the police calls are made. The citizens must be watchful of that. In terms of the future, I think it's good that we have an examination of the SROs. What is the role, and how does the community come around and define that role together? And I think an important thing is to have full implementation of wellness
is regarding law enforcement. What suggestions do you have to improve the relationship and accountability between law enforcement and local communities of color? What other programs can we enact? And we'll start with candidate Harrington, followed by candidate Castro, and then candidate Carlson.
I think this is a critical question and aligns with us looking inside at our own hearts and as a community what we mean when we talk about equity in policing. I think one of the most important things that can be done is to build relationships with grassroots organizations, with members of the African American community who have been in the field making a difference in members of their communities' lives. Not more institutional forces, but true, deep grassroots. And I'm not talking about building a bureaucracy. I'm talking about building relationships, having liaison positions that build relationships and not bloat a bureaucracy.
Castro, again, it is improving the relationship and accountability between law enforcement and communities of color.
All right. Well, first we have to address the origins of law enforcement and that the culture of law enforcement, first of all, makes it really difficult for police officers to see community members as community members. More often than not, they're trained to see folks as potential criminals. And so when we think about reinventing what public safety looks like, it is more about, instead of moving away from policing, moving towards community safety and creating programs that ensure that police officers are part of the community. If that means more community engagement and making sure that police officers actually look like the folks that they are serving. So we have to be really honest about what bias looks like in the culture of policing and addressing that and being really real about it, because I think we all know that there is racism happening in policing. Thank you.
The relationship between law enforcement and communities of color.
I think it's really important that in order to even have the opportunity to build trust with populations of color, the police department needs to demonstrate a commitment to changing internal practices that demonstrate how they are willing to change their own culture. So in talking to Chief Franklin, hearing their changes to their hiring practices, including bringing people of color and black residents of Rochester to participate in hiring and being thoughtful, begins to demonstrate that commitment. I would also like to say that we need to get away from thinking each organization or each agency needs to do this work alone. We have a high-functioning system in our community that engages meaningfully with people of color and people of all different backgrounds. We need to lean on those strong networks that exist, that are safe spaces for people to give that feedback, and not have the police come to them, but have an opportunity to draw on those experiences so people can speak meaningfully in that safe space. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question will come from the Post Bulletin. We are going to begin with candidate Castro, followed by candidate Carlson, and then candidate Harrington.
At times, relationships between the city council members and the county commissioners can appear to be strained. What would you do to improve the communication and relationships with county elected officials?
So currently, I think with COVID-19, it is imperative for all levels of government to be able to collaborate together to make sure that we can emerge out of this global pandemic thriving instead of just trying to survive. And it's not necessarily that we're going to be forced to have better relationships, but I think that we should always have had better relationships. There is a problem here in Rochester that a lot of organizations like to work in silos, and that is something that we've been talking about for the last 10 years that I've been here and worked in this community, and that we finally have to stop just talking about it and just do it, and make sure that this isn't about individual agendas, but this is about the city and the community as a whole and making sure that we do well for everyone as public servants and as leaders for this community. Thank you.
And again, what would you do to improve communication and relationships with county officials?
It is one of my highest priorities to improve collaboration between the city, the county, the school district, our nonprofit sector, as well as our private sector in this community. We're faced with less resources across the board. How do we develop those shared values, those shared goals, so we're aiming in the same direction to use our resources most effectively and efficiently? I'm very fortunate to be at the center of demonstrated examples of city-county partnership that we can build on. Through COVID response, the city and the county are working very closely in thinking through how do we direct our scarce resources most appropriately to meet the needs of our community. I'm very hopeful that as we look to the future into recovery and rebuilding, we will continue to commit to this investment of shared implementation of strategies. It has to be that way. There is no other way. The time for working in silos is over. Thank you.
And again, what would you do to improve communication and relationship with the county's elected officials?
I think some of the issues of communication are based on personality politics, pettiness. And what I would do is what I did when I was a junior high school teacher. I'd say, stop it or you've got detention. But seriously, what I would do is what I try to do every day in my work at the chamber, is bring together the county and the city to say what we are and what we have to be is citizen-centric. Not your jurisdiction or your jurisdiction, but the citizens' jurisdiction. So if I were elected, I would do just that. I would bring together a summit of the county and the city leaders and say, let's do a Venn diagram for the citizens. What are the issues where we must work together, where we have joint jurisdictions, and let's work together on housing, transportation, improving the quality of life. Let's work together as a team focused on the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. And our question, again, provided by the League of Women Voters. Affordable workplace housing and unsheltered homeless residents have been issues for several years in Rochester, and is worsening now during the time of increased unemployment. What is the city's responsibility, and what do you propose to do? We're going to begin with candidate Carlson, go on to candidate Harrington, and finally candidate Castro.
Well, what a great follow-up to that last question, because this is the perfect example of how desperately we need to work together across the city and county and nonprofit community and funders. I'm fortunate to sit on a committee that's working on homelessness in Rochester right now, so looking at short-term issues and including how the library is involved and the city and the county in other ways, and longer-term issues. We need to work on a comprehensive plan to prevent homelessness and work towards longer-term housing solutions that incorporates issues like workforce development, like like substance use and mental health supports. It has to be a comprehensive approach across sectors. The city is responsible in using the tools we have available, like TIF, but we have to do it jointly. It is not going to get better. We are not going to move the needle until we jointly invest in this incredibly important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Harrington. Again, this is affordable workplace housing and unsheltered homeless residents have been issues for years. What is the city's responsibility, and what do you propose to do?
Affordable housing and homelessness, integrated, but two different questions as well. To create more affordable housing, I think the city has to do much more and lean into its responsibility. I think for too long, the city has assumed, many in the city have assumed that the market will fix the problem. It's clear the market is not going to fix the problem in Rochester or Minnesota at all. What we need to do is invest more, use our TIF funding for more low-rent, affordable housing, be a better partner, support those in our community who are building affordable homes, reduce policies, change policy like parkland dedication, which a few weeks ago I was talking to a developer who was going to do 78 affordable house units, 50% AMI. His bill from the city to do that, $800,000. That reduces affordable housing, that helps decrease opportunities for people, and creates more homelessness. We have to be a better partner.
Thank you. Candidate Castro, affordable housing and unsheltered homeless residents have been issues. What is the city's responsibility?
The city's responsibility is to ensure that residents have housing. When I was growing up, my family and I of 5 lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. I shared 1 bedroom with 2 sisters. Is that what affordable housing is supposed to look like? I don't think so. But what we could do, if we're starting a studio at $1,200, maybe we can add, utilities like broadband to that and make it much more affordable for folks. So we can do some things on the city end by making sure that we come up with creative ideas to deal with the stock that we already have right now. With sheltering the homeless population, we have lots of great resources. We have to get those folks to those resources and make sure that we work with the county to get some more housing and making sure folks have some place to sleep at night, and also to be able to have a safe place so they can then move into their own home eventually at some point. Thank you.
Next question is coming from the community, the audience. I'll read the question first. It involves the environment and energy. Former Mayor Brady signed a proclamation for 100% renewable energy in the community by 2030. Last year, the Rochester Public Utilities selected plans with the same commitment. How will you ensure that further developments in Rochester, including DMC developments, follow sustainable building practices and utilize green energy? We're going to begin with candidate Castro, followed by candidate Carlson, and then candidate Harrington.
Can you ask that question again?
I will. Mayor Brady signed a proclamation for 100% renewable energy by 2030. Last year, Rochester Public Utilities selected resource plans with the same commitment. How will you ensure that further developments in Rochester, including for the DMC, follow sustainable building practices and utilize green energy?
I think it's important that we have already made that commitment, but we also have to move forward when it comes to partnering with builders, that they will also sign on and make a commitment that they will move towards 100% renewable, creating construction that will align with the idea of sustainable building into the future. We need to work with organizations like the Sierra Club to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable when it comes to ensuring that we will move towards 100% renewable energy at some point. Thank you.
Candidate Carlson, how will you ensure that further developments in Rochester, including DMC, follow sustainable building practices and utilize green energy?
Thank you for this background. I have a strong background in environmental work, and this is a really high priority of mine. So I've had some good conversations with DMC and others like the Sierra Club recently, and I really do commend RPU in what they've done to shift away from shift towards renewables and away from coal. We do have work to do, not only in our further development, so using LEED standards and other standards based on the best practices, but we also know that there's a really good program already up and running through DMC to promote businesses and nonprofits across the community to save energy or reduce energy costs, increase their efficiency, so they're saving dollars to go more towards their mission or they're paying their employees. So there's already some good work. I feel hopeful about that we can move forward and that they will commit in a way that we all as a community can hold them accountable to. Thank you.
Senator Harrington, how will you ensure that further developments in Rochester, including DMC, follow sustainable building practices?
Well, I think DMC has kind of set the standard in many ways for sustainable building practices, and I believe they are committed and will continue to do that in light of their board and their oversight. Clearly, energy is in a major transition nationally. Coal is on its way out. Renewables are on their way in. One of the ways that's going to sustain this change is that the costs are going down and the incentives continue to go up. That's what I think we have to do as a city, make certain that the incentives are there and that people are aware, because I think there's a lot of ignorance about coal costs versus renewable costs. And we also have to make sure people understand that even in a renewable environment, as the grid grows and expands, our ability to find energy off the grid will really increase people's ability to reliably and cost-effectively depend on renewable energy. Thank you.
Our next question from the audience, from the online audience, reads, the Star Tribune recently reported that Rochester has one of the highest disparities between black and white poverty rates. What policies could be used to address this disparity? We're going to begin with candidate Harrington, followed by candidate Castro, and finally candidate Carlson. Again, this is addressing inequality, Rochester's high disparities between black and white poverty rates.
I think this question is really about equity. Equity in opportunity and equity in quality of life. It's one of the reasons, it's two of the reasons I'm running for office, because I think we have to close those gaps. They are significant, and I think COVID helped uncover them, and to the point where it cannot be ignored. A few months back, I testified up in Minneapolis with President of the Federal Reserve and Judge Page on educational opportunity and whether or not we need a constitutional amendment to help close the educational disparities. That is still an open question, but I think it is great that as a state, as a community, we're starting to talk about how do we do that? How do we start to close those health disparities gaps? These are significant, they need attention, but again, we don't need people hired by the bureaucracy to do this. We need people of the community brought in to have strong, meaningful conversations that are strategic and can drive change.
Thank you. Candidate Castro, what policies can address the disparity between the black and white poverty rates?
So the wealth gap in the United States, white families have 8 times more wealth than black families, and that's historical. So for us to be able to go back 400 years and allow black people to have property, we can't do that. But moving forward, we can create a $15 an hour minimum wage. That will help bring some wealth up for some folks, because a lot of black, indigenous people of color usually work service industry jobs where they work minimum wage. Also, we also have to ensure that there's high quality education that helps create more equity amongst communities, and affordable housing would be one of those ways of making sure that we can create equity and creating a pathway to ownership, home ownership, and small business forgivable loans that we can give to minority owned businesses and women.
Candidate Carlson.
First of all, we can't just look at poverty in a vacuum. People experiencing poverty are in a situation where many other factors are also at play. So the idea of affordable housing is really important. But how do we look at building wealth when we historically have not had as much wealth in our Black community as in our white community? Well, there are a few ways we can do that. We can look at home ownership, not only creating access to affordable home ownership, but keeping that home ownership affordable. The city has a lot of tools available to make sure people can get into houses and stay in the houses in order to save their resources. We also, as a city and as DMC, can further prioritize contracts with minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses, but minority-owned businesses for sure when our targets are so very low right now. In addition, we can also invest in our businesses through loans. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Candidate Carlson, if you want to stay up there, you're the first on the next question, so that'll make that a little easier. This is regarding housing. How do you plan to balance the needs for ongoing residential and commercial development of property in the city of Rochester while strongly protecting and preserving the character of the neighborhoods? Candidate Carlson will go first, followed by Candidate Harrington, and then finally Candidate Castro.
Investing in safe and welcoming neighborhoods is among my top priorities in my campaign, so I'm glad to hear this question as well. So we do need affordable housing, and I think our city is thinking creatively and has been in the last year or so in new zoning or zoning reform and how we can create those opportunities closer into the center of our city. And yet, we have a really strong Heritage Preservation Commission that is a group of citizens that helps us prioritize those spaces in those areas of our city that we need to protect and preserve because they show the history, the rich history of in our story of Rochester. So I think it is a balance. I think that there are certain areas of the city that because of our DMC effort are going to change no matter what. So we need to think about what are those most important spaces to preserve and how do we continue to add vibrancy to especially our downtown neighborhoods to make them both fun to live and accessible. Thank you.
Candidate Harrington, how do you plan to balance the needs for ongoing residential and commercial development of neighborhoods?
I think downtown development is really important, but also we're looking at bringing 50,000 new jobs, 50,000 new people into this city. So downtown development is critical. That's going to be much more dense. The new zoning rules, and I commend the city on rewriting the comprehensive plan, translating that into the new land development manual, and into a new unified code. The new zoning is going to allow for more dense development, but it's going to have to be meshed with certain principles around transportation and historic preservation. So I commend the city on this new effort, but I think we also have to think about what is the development going to be like that allows and comfortably homes an additional 50,000 people. So downtown critical, outside of downtown critical as well. The historic preservation, I think, is very, very important, but it has to be blended and make certain that it's not just preserving buildings, but it is preserving character, and that is critical in moving forward.
Thank you. Our next question. Oh no, you're right. No, Candidate Castro, I'm sorry. I was working ahead. No, I'm so sorry.
Brooke and Kathleen both said. I think the plan to succeed that the city council has already put together for our strategic plan into 2040 kind of has created a plan or a pathway of what Rochester is going to look like as we add 50,000 more jobs. And we are going to have more people live downtown. But I do love this city because it's a very historic city, has cute neighborhoods, and it would be great to be able to preserve that because we also have families that want to have single homes, but also at the same time mixed use and mixed income housing and transportation. So thank you, Brooke and Kathleen. Great answers.
I want you to stay there because you're the first on the next question. I don't think that happens again on here now. This is regarding transportation. What is your position on creating a diverse transportation system which includes safe bike and pedestrian passage and a robust transit system?
I agree with it. I think it's a great idea. I'm from the Bay Area, grew up in the Bay Area. I lived in Berkeley, San Francisco. Lots of people take public transportation. It's really important if you are a growing population to lower the amounts of cars that are going to be downtown. We're having parking issues, so how do we address parking downtown at the same time making sure that more folks are working downtown? So that's the struggle that the city is dealing with and have to confront. So they're looking at transportation villages, but we do have to have more reliable public transportation. And we're working with the county to ensure that we make sure that we're addressing that issue.
We'll go to candidate Carlson, please. Same question. What is your position on creating a diverse transportation system which includes safe bike and pedestrian passage and a robust transport system?
Thank you. We need to be thoughtful about how we safely get people in and out of downtown and how we create multiple modes for safe transportation for all ages and stages of life in neighborhoods throughout the city. We have a fantastic trail system here. I love to use it with my family and do so regularly. I think about bike lanes as an opportunity to create new linkages so people can more easily get around for errands, enjoyment, but also get to work if needed. Building and maintaining parking spaces for the city is very expensive. It costs something like $35,000 to build and maintain a space. So if we can get more people safely able to bike downtown, that can potentially save the cost. It can also create that space for somebody else to use. So it is potentially beneficial to have bike lanes, not on every street, not everywhere, but in a way that makes sense to help get us around. Thank you.
And candidate Harrington.
Transportation, critical function of a city. And it's a foundational element of any great city. And it has to be a network of roads, streets, well-paved streets, trails, and mass transit. And alternatives for pedestrians, safe alternatives for pedestrians and bike riders. So I think it's critical, and I applaud the cities for their transit-oriented development plan to include safe bike lanes and safe pedestrians. And I think as we move to seeing the bus rapid transit inclusion, how does that get meshed into with safe bike lanes? But I think all of these are priorities and important to not just moving people, goods, and services, but to strong public health.
Next question from the community. Under the city charter, the council determines their own salaries. Do you believe that an independent panel or a different method should be used to decide if pay raises are appropriate? We're going to begin with candidate Carlson, followed by candidate Harrington, and then candidate Castro.
Well, Enid, I certainly think a different method should have been used than was. That was a mess, and it has turned so many people off to the process. Yes, a different process should have been used. Yet here we are today, and the salaries have already increased. And now we have created space for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to run for council because they would have to leave a well-paying or a paying job to do so, and that's not possible for everybody. Being on council is a lot of work and requires serious commitment. It's not a hobby. So I do believe that the pay increase does allow different people and creates more equitable opportunity than we had before. Thank you.
Yes, under the city charter, the council determines their own salaries. Do you believe that an independent panel or different method should be used to decide if pay raises are appropriate?
Well, I certainly think a different method would have been appropriate for this consideration, certainly a more transparent method. And when you're raising salaries that much, I think it would have been advisable to bring in a third party to do the analysis. Many do that, obviously in the private sector, but this significant increase should have been examined or validated by an outside source. So I think the process was flawed. I do not think you should decide your own salaries, especially when it's leaping like that to such a higher level. I would hope that as the council considers the 2021 budget, that the 4.5% increase is certainly reconsidered as it applies to the elected officials.
Well, my opinion is based on the fact that if they had given themselves pay raises since the 80s, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But I think that what it comes down to is the idea of who gets to be on city council. And so if you limit the amount of what city council makes, then you limit who gets to be on city council. And I think that was all planned to ensure that only certain folks who are independently wealthy can be on the city council. So what does that mean? Does that really mean that city council members are actually doing the job for the people or for their special interests? Thank you.
Our next question is about community involvement. We're going to begin with candidate Harrington, followed by candidate Castro and candidate Carlson. How will you engage constituents in your decision-making as a council member?
I think there are three critical roles as city council president. One is creating the agenda. Two is managing the meeting so that there's robust and good debate. And third is outreach. And this, I really would propose we change the model. And we change the model so we have city council going out to the people they represent, not asking them to come into government to talk to them for 1 minute at a hearing. No, I think we take the hearings out to the people. I would like to establish a neighborhoods advisory committee to help in doing that, to ensuring that all parts of the city are touched, being a very robust channel of communication. But as city council president, I would go out to the people, not just ask them to come in and talk to us. It would have to be robust, systematic, and I would like to do it with fellow city council members.
How will you engage constituents in your decision-making?
It is 2020, and we are a digital age where there's a lot of social media, especially with COVID-19. A lot of folks have been doing a lot of interaction on social media. And so I have been able to engage with a lot of community members just through comment sections in the Post Bulletin or KAAL, because there are folks out there that have really strong opinions about what city council members or government leaders are doing. And if you're not tapping into what the everyday person cares about or thinks about, I think it's going to be really difficult to be able to make the best decisions for all people in Rochester. We do have all the different ways that we do communicate with the public, if that's the hearings, emails, listening sessions, outreach, focus groups. We do all those things, but we have to make sure that we're actually taking in that information and using it when we do make decisions.
Both of my colleague candidates have made good points, and I do think it's really important to consider social media. Yet we're also experiencing a huge digital divide, so not everybody has access to candidates through social media. So that is one avenue that we need to be very consistent about and consider other ways of working with our community. So beyond going to places and spaces where people are, which is a great idea, again, we have incredible networks in this community already built that are safe, trusted spaces for authentic and meaningful community engagement. That our government leaders, whether a council or a police department, need to lean on these networks that already exist to connect to people in that way where it reduces the power dynamic of government in our community members. Thank you.
Before we go to closing statements, and it is, I'm sorry, I should have kind of let Candidate Carlson up there. In order, Candidate Carlson, Candidate Harrington, Candidate Castro, a very quick question. What is your position on wearing masks, requiring wearing masks in Rochester?
Nobody likes a mask. They're so annoying. But I am a public health professional and I'm a member of the small business community. So I strongly believe that in order to have reopened our economy, we needed the mask policy. And in fact, we probably should have had it sooner, because right now I'm looking at my son who's 5 years old and about to start kindergarten and who is incredibly excited that I have no idea what's ahead for him because we're experiencing increases in our COVID numbers right now. So yes, wear your mask, please. Stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, do everything you can to prevent further spread of this disease. Thank you.
Absolutely support requiring masks. It's critical to keeping to preventing the spread of the disease and to keeping the economy open now and perhaps even opening further in the future. I do think, however, it has to be accompanied by strong, clear, comprehensible public health education. People have to understand it's not about them, it's about others. And I still think today, there's confusion about that, and we have to have accompanying a mandate with clear public health education. Thank you.
I've always been a strong supporter of mandating mask wearing, especially when we decided to reopen businesses for us to be able to mitigate the amount of infection and to keep businesses open, as Kathleen had pointed out. And I think that as public servants, we also have to ensure the public health of our community. And if wearing a mask seems a little inconvenient, but it also saves lives and lowers infection rate, why not? Thank you.
I'm going to make a little space here. What? No, different order now. Okay. Thank you, candidates. That concludes the questions portion of our forum. We will now hear closing statements from each candidate. You will each have 2 minutes to give your closing statement. Candidate Harrington will go first, followed by candidate Castro, and then candidate Carlson.
And then we're all going to do laps together somewhere. So thank you very much to the League and to the Post-Bulletin for sponsoring this, and to those of you who are watching this at home and will watch it in the future. City elections matter. I've worked at all levels of government, and I can say, from the bottom of my heart, local government touches people's lives so much, so closely, and so profoundly. So please, pay attention to these elections. They matter. I also want to thank my opponents for a good session. We had fun walking around. We're living a unique experience during COVID, an election during COVID. But I'm running for city council because I believe we need change. Before COVID, our city was in the midst of incredible change, doing a comprehensive plan that hadn't been done for decades. All of the change that's coming with that. We need leaders who can help move the city through that change. And then we need to help, I want to help move the city through these extraordinary times. The unprecedented recession, the high unemployment we're going to face, unfortunately, and the sad but true reality of the impact of systemic racism in our community. I'm running to promote these changes and help our community move through them. Running for office is not a stepping stone for me. It's the capstone of a career that has been dedicated to public service and to working in the private sector and through my own volunteerism. I have a record of proven leadership at all levels with outcomes to prove it. I offer the learnings of my lifetime, creating powerful partnerships, stabilizing organizations, developing strong mission-focused teams that can accomplish things they didn't think even possible. So I want to use my experience and leadership skills to help us through this time. I ask for your support and your vote on August 11th. Thank you.
We must embrace an expansive vision for Rochester's economy that creates jobs, puts 21st century public investment first, advances economic equity for historically disenfranchised residents, and protects the environment. I believe that I am the right person to lead Rochester as we work towards these goals. Through my work with nonprofits, as an immigrant and queer person of color, I know the importance of listening to all voices at the table. For Rochester to heal, to thrive, and grow, from the global pandemic, we need to listen and uplift all Rochester residents, especially those that have felt unheard and unseen by city leadership. It is time to make Rochester a truly welcoming city that values all of its residents, both the native-born and immigrant, white, Black, Indigenous, people of color, straight, and LGBTQ+, both the poorest of our residents, including those experiencing homelessness, as well as the Mayo physicians and CEOs. Rochester can only heal and be truly great city when all of us are heard and valued. I grew up in poverty. I worked hard to get where I am today, so I understand what it will take to not just survive, but thrive. That's the kind of leadership Rochester needs right now as we create a new normal and rebuild our economy during an uncertain time and with an ever-changing future. If you'd like to learn more about my campaign and my platform, you can go to VanGCastro.com. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, Rochester, Rochester Public Library, the Post Bulletin for hosting this forum, and of course, candidate Carlson and Harrington for participating, and all of you folks out there for being here and asking us questions and watching tonight. Thank you.
And I also want to extend my thank yous to the League and the library and the Chamber, who I know is sponsoring some of the other forums in the Post Bulletin. Thank you for doing this today. My fellow candidates, it was an adventure. We did it. We're here. And everyone else, thank you for taking the time this evening to spend your evening with us and learn from us. I believe you should support me as your candidate for City Council President, because I'm not only a small business owner and a trusted leader in our community, but I'm a mom of young sons and a daughter of retired parents who live here too. I understand what other families are going through right now. My family has experienced unexpected job loss. I'm anxious about whether my sons and I will get back on the ice with their friends for our upcoming hockey season. I'm living this crisis with you. I'm at the heart of our community's collective efforts to support people and create efficient, just, and thoughtful systems that work together to meet our shared goals. My strength is in learning from our broad array of voices to find that shared value and move us forward together. I'm not an activist in the traditional sense, but I am active within the system to bring business and human services together to make Rochester a better place to live and a better place to do business. We need to drive efficient and effective delivery of services to provide greater value for all taxpayers. Budget shortfalls demand we be bold and creative and make tough decisions when we need to. This will require public-private partnerships to address issues around transportation, housing, and economic development. The same old ways of doing things with the same old players is not going to work. I'm committed to learning from what we have done really well and building new systems and opportunities where we have deficits. I want this community to be the very best it can be so people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds can thrive for generations to come. Thank you.
Candidates. I would like to thank each of the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and for your willingness to participate in this democratic process by running for office. I'd like to remind you all that the views expressed in the forum tonight were those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this program, of this forum. Thank you for coming, those of you who are here tonight. I would also like to thank our partners, the Rochester Post Bulletin and the Rochester Public Library. Remember that Election Day is August 11th, and that early voting has started. If you voted by absentee ballot and would like to change your ballot based on what you learned tonight, visit Minnesota Votes, MNVOTES.org for more information on that process. Please remember to vote. If you have a question about your polling place or you would like to see your sample ballot, visit vote411.org, VOTE411.org, where you'll also find information about tonight's candidates. To see this forum again, access the forms from the Rochester Public Library website. Good night, everybody.